Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review. I'm here today to talk about Black History Month, the month that is a celebration of my people, because I am a black man and everything. And it's about all our accomplishments, all the oppression that we have gone through over like centuries of living in like America and stuff like that. So I'm here today to talk to you about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 1, Episode 20, Heart of Glory. Going all the way back to Season 1, the crappy season. But I actually like this episode. Not every episode in Season 1 is crappy, just a good number of them are. And Season 1 is one of those seasons where some of the main cast, like Patrick Stewart, Marina Sirtis, said that they didn't even unpack their stuff because they assumed the show was going to get canceled. Or one of them was going to get fired or something like that. But this is a Worf solo episode, or centered episode, I should say. Now, Worf is played by Michael Dorn. And so it's not my favorite Worf story, but it is one that I always felt like this episode represents so many things. And like, it's Worf interacting with his own species for the first time in like decades since he's been a kid. And it's one of those things where it's kind of like, he's been raised by humans, works with humans, but now he's around his own people. Like, what is that interaction like? Does he feel comfortable around them? Do they like him? Do they dislike him? This always felt like a metaphor to me, like for many things, like, people of race, people of gender, people from another country, age, stuff like that. And since it's Black History Month, I always felt that this episode was probably like the blackest episode there was. Well, other than that one black episode of Season 1 that nobody talks about because that episode is racist. But I always felt like this was always like a metaphor for like, Worf, a Klingon raised by humans and meeting Klingons for the first time. Kind of like, say, if a black man who only interacts with like white people, all of a sudden starts interacting with his own race. Like, because people of other races act very different from one another. So how would he act around his own people? Will he be accepted? Will he not? Will he judge them? Stuff like that. And I always got that sense that, Worf, was always in that conflicted space whenever he was interacting with his own people because, he's been raised by humans and humans are completely different from that of Klingons. And with Worf, Michael Dorn being like a black man, I always felt that metaphor to it, you know what I'm saying? Now, Michael Dorn, I've only seen him in live action when it comes to Star Trek. I've never seen him in live action in anything else. I know what he looks like, but I've just never seen him in live action. Now, voice-wise, yes, I have heard his voice tons of times in many animated stuff. Mostly that of DC stuff in the Superman projects and in Justice League. And so, like, he has that really distinctive voice to him, but his Worf voice is actually fake. He did it for, how many years? Let's see. He's done Worf voice for over 10, 12 years and stuff. And so it took him a while to get back to his own natural voice, which is very similar to Worf, just not as deep. Worf is my favorite Klingon of all time. Like, Worf is a very interesting character because of the simple fact he is a Klingon, but he's been raised by humans, but he doesn't act totally human. He still acts like a Klingon. He still has Klingon urges and stuff, but he's not as docile as many humans are. He's not like B'Elanna Torres. B'Elanna Torres is very human and stuff, even has human-looking teeth. But Worf is completely different type because he's full Klingon and B'Elanna is half. And so, like, to me, he is the ultimate Klingon. Now, I've always assumed Klingons were played by black people. Because, okay, this episode came out in 1988. And so, like, Star Trek Next Generation is the first Star Trek show I've ever seen. And so, like, these were the first depictions of Klingons I've ever seen. And so I just automatically assume, okay, Michael Dorn's black, you know, I guess Klingons are black or whatever. And then, you know, in the other shows like Voyager and Deep Space Nine, they had that same similar look. But then when I went back and I saw the original series, I'm like, those are some strange looking black people. Like, what the heck is going on? And then one time I looked up one of the actors in Star Trek who played a Klingon. I'm like, holy crap, he's white. So they literally put brown face on the dude and stuff. Oh, and of course there was B'Elanna, and I knew for a fact she wasn't black. So I'm all like, oh, they got a different race of Klingon. But yeah, Klingons, in my opinion, are probably like the most racist thing on television. And especially when you know the history of why they was made, is even more racist. So, okay, Klingons all have brown skin. Like dark brownish type skin, except for B'Elanna. Her skin complexion is natural. Her being a Latino woman, the actress and everything. But every Klingon has like brown skin painted on them and stuff. So they're technically doing brown face. And so that's racist just on its own, right? But now we get into the real reason of why they look the way they do in the original series. In the original series, they're not based off of black people. They're based off of Chinese people. And so their skin, instead of being like golden yellow, it's like a golden brown in the original series. That's the way their mustaches look the way they do and all this other stuff. It was either Chinese people or Japanese people. I can't remember which one. But Asian people just in general. And it's because back then in America, you know, they was going through like a difficult time with like Asian people, and you know how racist Hollywood is and the reason why they dress the way they did. So yeah, Klingons were originally based off of Asian people to be a stereotype and to make fun of them. Racist Hollywood. Anyways. Now, this episode is, let's see, it was written by a very interesting person. So first, the story was brought up and constructed by that of Herbert Wright, D.C. Fontana, but it was written in just 2 days by none other than Maurice Hewley. If you're a Star Trek fan and a Trekkie fan and you know about the first season of Next Generation and like, you know, the second season with the whole Gates McFadden and why she left after like, you know, the first season and everything, then you know who Maurice is. I believe he started off as Gene Roddenberry's like a lawyer or something like that, but later was made executive producer of Next Generation, writer and stuff like that. He oversaw some stuff, and yeah, he's not very liked in the fandom, and he did not like Gates McFadden, got rid of her. I saw this one interview with him with William Shatner. He said, you know what? We should like rewrite the entire Next Generation thing where the crew, the Enterprise, like dies and has to get like a new crew. This man hated those people so much. Oh my God. But it was directed by Rob Bowman and stuff. And so with Maurice, the thing with him is that he said that this episode It's the closest thing to that of his philosophies and stuff. When he needed help with script, he went to Rick Berman and stuff, and he was like on a tight deadline, like under a lot of pressure and stuff. He believes the episode came out very well. Michael Dorn really liked this episode. He said because we finally got the backstory of Worf after 20 episodes. Because nobody really knew why Worf was a Klingon in Starfleet. Because, for me, I just simply just didn't know because I didn't watch the original series or the movie. So I didn't know that Klingons used to be the enemies of Starfleet and everything. And they were always in battle and everything. And so, yeah, it is kind of weird. Why is a Klingon there and everything? Well, when his family was at, I forget where, I think I can't talk right now, Kittimer or something like that, a war broke out between the Klingons and the Romulans, and like his father was murdered. And so a human Starfleet officer, petty chief, found Worf and took him as his own and everything, and adopted him. And so, and then he left him with his wife, and that's when Worf grew up around humans. Tragic backstory. Always a tragic backstory in Star Trek, no matter if it's old Trek or new Trek. So this is why Worf, has like been raised by humans. And of course, since his adopted father was in Starfleet, he later decided to join Starfleet and everything. Worf is truly one of those unique, interesting characters who's kind of like the best of both worlds. He has a strong human lineage and everything from growing up with them and learning by them and learning what Starfleet is like, but he doesn't know too much about Klingon life other than what he remembers as a kid. But then as the course of the series goes on, he learns more about Klingons, even served with them and stuff like that. So he has a really true good understanding. Sadly, 20 years later in the Picard series, I would have liked to see him as an ambassador. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't do that. I think originally in what's the finale called? The Best of Both Worlds, I think it's called. I think that's what it's called. I can't remember. But the finale of this show, he did leave Starfleet and he did go with the Klingons, and I believe he became like an ambassador or a chancellor or something like that. And Michael Dorn has even said before the Picard series ever came out that he wants to see his character leave Starfleet and go with the Klingons and stuff. But of course, because of nostalgia and the Picard series is horrible, they decided to keep Worf in Starfleet and make him a captain of the Enterprise F or E, I think. And so then something happened. I think he crashed it or something like that. And so and then he just completely changed in Picard's here. He's a pacifist now. And I'm just like, they made him weak. Now, I think this episode is really, really good, but it ain't perfect. It has its flaws. Some of the dialogue is kind of iffy because it's season 1, especially with Tasha Yar. See, when I started watching this show, I didn't know who she was because I started around season 2. And so when I started watching season 1, I'm like, who the heck is this woman? She was horrible on the show. I'm sorry. No wonder she left because her character was just horrible and had the worst dialogue and everything. Like that hostage situation or asking the captain, do you want me to leave my position on the bridge or go lead the security team? Who asked that crap, But this is when the dialogue was really, really iffy. Also, the Klingon dialogue makes no sense because since they had to rush the script, they couldn't perfect the Klingon language and it just comes out as gibberish. But it sounds good to me, so, Rob Bowman did a really good job directing this movie. The funeral scene of like the Klingons, I think, was done very well and very interesting. You really like saw the intensity in the face of the Klingons as they're looking into the eyes of the person who's about to die. And then the howl as like the camera pans on them, then kind of zooms up. Like that was a really nice visual. And an even better visual is in the third act when the dude gets shot and he falls through the glass on like the top part of like engineering. That was just like amazing and stuff. And I remember, like, I think the director said, you know, nobody's ever shot from the top part of engineering, so why not do it? But just the angles of it really takes you into a completely different perspective. And that's what I really appreciate about like directing. It's not about like spinning the camera around all crazy like in New Trek, or having everything like all dark, or having everybody act all silly and goofy and stuff like that. Like you have no idea how much I miss like real cinematography and real acting and stuff. So the show starts off and the Enterprise are investigating a ship, a freighter, a Terralian freighter in the neutral zone. Now, Federation ships aren't supposed to be in the neutral zone. This is something them and the Romulans have like established and stuff, but this is the first season, so things are slightly different. Also, the bridge is just slightly different than what it would be in season 2. A lot of the ship is different from what it would be like in season 2. Like the way the two stations are at the front of the ship, the ops and like the con, you know, Picard's chair has like wood to it, and then something in the background looks slightly different. I'm so glad they redesigned it. And so they head to the ship and they send a away team there because they sense like 3 life forms. Now, Geordi, his visor comes in handy, which, you know, something's kind of weird that you stop and think about it. Like when you watch this nowadays, they hook up a device to his visor and like they're able to see what Geordi sees as kind of like a recorder, you know, and like a webcam type thing. And it's just kind of like, wow, the 24th century doesn't have like webcams or video like that. Well, that's because like, I guess like, you know, because there was no Wi-Fi back then, no internet, no webcams, but they had camcorders and they could broadcast live on the news. So I don't understand how they're not able to do that on the Starship. So that's something that's always like weirded me out. Or security cameras within the ship. Like that's something I always found strange. Like in the TNG, something would happen on the ship and they have no idea what happened because there's like no security cameras. But then they started adding that stuff in like Voyager. Like, okay, it makes sense now. But you know, back in these days, it was a primitive time when it comes to technology. So this was kind of cool that they got to see how the way Geordi sees. And he sees a lot of images and blurs and shapes and colors and barely can make anybody out. And so Picard is just very fascinated by this. Picard is fascinated by a lot of stuff that happens in this episode. Like when he's learning about the Klingons and the burial ritual and stuff like that. And it's like, he act like he's never seen a Klingon before and probably never have. And also most of the ship. You gotta stop and think about the audience when they watched this back in the day, like the older audience. Last time they saw Klingons, they were the enemy and everything. And so, like, also, I wanted to point out that Geordi and Worf are lieutenant junior grade and they're wearing red uniforms. Geordi is the con officer. I never liked Geordi as like a pilot. He was very sarcastic in the first season. And the thing I never understood, if he's the pilot, why is he always going on like away missions? And why is he so smart and always in engineering and stuff? That never made no sense to me. And of course, in season 1, they didn't have a chief engineer who was part of the main cast. they had two chief engineers, an older Scottish sounding guy, which is of course supposed to be kind of like Scotty, and a woman. And so, like, I think there was a woman one time. I think there was, maybe. And so they was just like guest stars, never recurring, never like main cast. And so that was a major problem because you gotta be in engineering when it comes to a Star Trek show. I think Discovery at that time, the first season, never had a chief engineer, and we never really saw engineering. We mostly just saw Stamets' little like science workplace. And so both Geordi and Worf are wearing red uniforms, which still to this day, I have no idea what Worf's position was in season one before Tasha died. It's like he's always either, like, sometimes they would have him as a pilot, which never made no sense. Then sometimes they would have him on the back computer panels. And, I've never understood what those panels are for. I know one of them is engineering and one of them is science, but what's the big middle one in like the big one in the middle and stuff? They've never truly explained that because ops does all the scanning around the ship and so can security and stuff. But then when you don't see him there, you see him at tactical standing next to Tasha, which is all like, why? Why does he have to stand next to her for? She's the security officer. And sometimes they would have him do like security type stuff and not have her. It's like, well, why is she the security chief if you're not having her do security? And so the away team is that Riker, Geordi, and Data. And so Data has to open the door because it's like stuck. And we get to see his android strength and everything. Also in season one, Data was always so jittery and everything in his movements. And so they find three survivors, and it's three Klingons of all things, not Tyrellians. And I think they saw a weapon signature from Ferengi or something like that. And so they all beam back on board and everything, but one of them is hurt. Now the Klingons, every Klingon, because it's technically there's five with Worf, but the other four we'll see, all of their names start with a K. And it's just kind of like, y'all couldn't think of names that didn't start with a K. And it's just kind of do all Klingons have names that start with K? And it's just kind of like, well, why does Worf have the name Worf and everything, And so the main Klingon is played by, I think it's, how you say, it's Von Armstrong. He played Chorus. And so he will go on to be an admiral in the Enterprise show. And trying to think of the other people's names. The actor who played Cormel, I think, what's his name? Cormel, I think that's the Klingon name. Well, the actor who plays him, he sadly passed up. No, wait, did he? Yeah, he sadly passed away. So, no, wait. And I think two of them died. I think he might be one of them. I'm not in front of my computer right now, so I'm trying to remember. But I think the one, I think his passenger, Cornell, I think he passed away. So may he rest in peace. Then there is Cavius, something like that. He's the one who's injured and the one being carried and everything. And so when they get back to sickbay and everything, they meet Worf for the first time. And Worf is just very excited to see other Klingons, he hasn't seen Klingons since he was a child. And if he's a lieutenant junior grade, he has to be in his mid-20s or something like that. And so, they start asking him just questions about how did he become started to work on the starship and everything, working for the Federation and Starfleet. And, why isn't he back home on the home world and stuff? And, he tells them his story about what happened to like his father and stuff like that. And so, like, he said that, he was the age of ascension or before ascension or something like that. So they're all like, that young. What does that mean? How old is that? Don't know. And so, but it just must mean he was a really young person at that time. And so, as their friend is in sick bay getting treated by Beverly, who doesn't do much in this episode because, Maurice wrote this episode, he decides he's going to hang out with the Klingons. Now, what's weird is that when they are given their quarters, they know how to use the replicators on a Starfleet ship. And it's just like, how? Like, Klingons, even though, there's the peace agreement between those two, they don't exactly just go aboard Starfleet ships and everything. There's still tension between them, but not as much as back in the day. And it's just kind of odd and like weird and stuff that they would know how to use like the replicator. But of course they're hungry and they want to eat, because like when they started getting questions about why are they on a Terrellian freighter and everything, they completely changed the subject, talk about, oh, we're hungry and blah, 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 and stuff like that. And so like, when they're with Worf, they start to tease him, if you will. They start to aggravate him, and he's offended by this. He's just kind of like, why are you trying to anger me? Because they're mocking him, talking about, have the humans made you docile? Do you still feel like, temptation of like battle in like your veins and stuff like that? Or like, or have they like made you into like a little like, kitten or something like that? And he's like, getting angry, and they're just kind of doing that to test him, to make sure the humans haven't made him weak, which pisses me off in New Trek, when in the Picard series, they made him docile and a pacifist and everything. He can still throw down when he needs to and chop off a head, but peace is his way now. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, like, whatever, man. And so, like, at some point in time, their colleague is dying. Now, I forgot to mention how big their shoes are. My God. When you see them get off the transporter, they're wearing these ginormous metal-looking boots. And so the person that they're with, he's dying. And you see Chorus, like, open the guy's eyes and gives, like, a very intense, like, stare into the dude's eyes and everything. And he just stares at the dude's eyes for like the longest time. Then when the dude dies, his other comrade and like Worf, they look up and kind of give out like a roar and everything, a loud like primal scream. And so then you see, I forget the dude's name. I want to say Cormel, and I'm just going to say that. Cormel, he takes like, the spike off like the other dude's boot. And I always wonder, why the heck is he doing that for? And so like, they go back with Worf and this and that. And like I said before, Picard, he's just kind of like, he didn't understand why they was doing this, like why they was howling and stuff like that. And Data, who knows everything pretty much, tells him that is like, the Klingon kind of like, funeral, like burial type thing. They don't bury really their dead. What they do is this. The reason why they look death in the eyes is so they won't be afraid of it when it's time for them to die. And they howl so that they're letting like, I guess the spirits know that the dead is coming or something like that. Or that a warrior is coming into the land of the dead. And so, it's kind of like a warning. So it's kind of like, hey, this warrior is like coming in the land of the dead and everything. And so, like, this was neat to know. I don't know if it's ever been explained in like TOS or like the movies. But like something weird happens that this is the part of the dialogue that's a little clunky. So at some point in time in the episode, Worf, who's not really understanding why they was on a Torellian freighter and this and that, he starts pressing them more and more until they finally confess. They hijacked the vessel. So they hijacked it, and there was no like Ferengis, nothing like that, and they fired on another Klingon ship that was supposed to take them in. Now, I'm not exactly sure what their original crime was as to why the Klingons were after them, but they said they wanted to go live on the planet so they can live in peace and this and that. And I wish the dialogue was a little bit better to explain what their real motivation was, because it's a little confusing and stuff. Even more confusing is that Worf now knows the real reason why all this went down, why, like, they commandeered a ship, why they fired on their own people, and he doesn't turn them in. He just goes about his business and doesn't even snitch on them, which, like I said before, reminds me of a metaphor of black people. Black folks don't like to snitch on other black people and stuff, especially ones that are like criminals and stuff or family members. And so then all of a sudden, a Klingon ship appears. Now, this actor, I think he might be dead. I'm not sure. And I forget his name is Commander Kern or something like that. He informs the Enterprise that they're looking for fugitives, those 3 Klingons that are on board the Enterprise, and that they are to be returned immediately. So this is when like Tasha, calls security to find them and stuff like that. But then she asked the weirdest question. She asked Captain Picard, like, do you want me to stay in my position here, or like do you want me to lead the security team? And he's just like, lead the security team. You're the security chief. Come on now. And I mean, I guess she thought that maybe the Klingon ship might fire on them and she needs to be there. But they have other people who can take that position and stuff. But hey, whatever. So they're still with Worf and everything. So one thing I wanted to point out before I forget, because I know I'm going to forget, is that for whatever reason, like I said before, these Klingons seem to know a lot about a Federation starship, which is weird. They don't, only Worf serves aboard now, but he doesn't talk to his people. So how the world would they know? These Klingons knew how to work the replicator. And not only that, but when they wanted a tour around the ship and Worf took them to engineering and stuff, they asked him, we've heard that this ship can separate during battle and everything. And of course, that's what happened in the first episode, the pilot. And it's just kind of and they asked to be taken to the battle bridge and everything. And it's just Worf takes them, wants to take them there and everything, and takes them to engineering. And it's why is he taking them to the most sensitive places of the ship where they can literally take it over? You can take over the ship from the battle bridge and from engineering and stuff. So, but of course, Worf is just so in glee of being around his people, he's just not thinking straight. So we see the 2 Klingons and Worf walking, and we see the security team come up on them. And then all of a sudden, the turbo lift opens, and there's a woman and a little girl there. And the little girl just runs up to the Klingon, and he picks her up. And I guess she's never seen a Klingon before, because she's just a little kid, you know what I'm saying? Which, kids will do the craziest things. They're always saying hey to strangers. Or this one time, I was out at Mardi Gras. This was years ago, and I had tons of beads on me. And then all of a sudden, this kid, about 3 years old, sees all the beads around my neck, runs up to me, and starts feeling on the beads. I'm all I'm just okay, whatever, it's a kid. Then I look up and I see his dad, this big old redneck dude, pissed off. Telling his son, boy, leave that man alone. Stop touching him. But you know, kids will be kids. And so Tasha informs the bridge that, hey, we got a hostage situation. And like, Chorus gives the kid back to the mother and she takes off. And so the security team, they arrest the two Klingons. And then Tasha tells Worf, whew, I thought we were gonna have a situation on our hands and everything. And Worf's all like, for what? And everything. She's all like, well, he took that little girl hostage. And Worf's all like, Klingons don't take nobody hostage. It's like cowardly to do that. And that line of dialogue reminded me so much of like how people perceive races they either don't like or races like they're unaware of. And this happens a lot in Black culture, where you'll have a Black person just doing whatever and like minding their own business, mainly like a male, right? And then you'll have like somebody else who would see them as they're walking towards them, will like change lanes, walk across the street, avoid them at any point in time, or assume that, the Black person coming in our building, we're gonna have a problem over here. And that's how people always perceive like other races they don't like or unfamiliar with, especially Black people. And like I said before, this episode has so many like Black metaphors in it that is like insane. And so the two Klingons do the craziest thing ever. So they're taken to the brig, right? And I'm so glad they redesigned the brig, because in season 1 it's weird. It's just the brig is in a random hallway with an open door and a bench, and it's just a force field on the empty door. Now, what if something was to happen and the force field goes down? Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm so glad they redesigned that in other seasons. Also, part of the sick bay is slightly different and stuff. So the two Klingons, they assemble a disruptor out of like random parts that are attached to their uniform and everything. Now the random parts look like part of the uniform, and one of the parts is the little horn on the dead guy's boots and everything. This was so cool, and it was so unexpected, and it shows just how resourceful and smart Klingons are, to where they hide their weapons in plain sight and you'll never know it. So of course they break out and they start shooting the place up, and they start killing security guards and stuff. And so Cornell, he ends up dying. Died on the show and died in real life, if he's the one who actually died. I forget which one actually died in real life. So he heads to engineering. Now one thing, like Worf is not with the security team, but when he's in like engineering, he asks for like Worf and everything, and he'll only talk to him, his fellow like Klingon brother. And this also reminds me of Black folks too. Whenever there's like a situation that goes around in like America, and then like they send like a news reporter to start like investigating or just ask a bunch of questions, if it's Black related, they normally send a Black news reporter to go and talk to those people and interview them and stuff. And so Worf goes there, and the Klingon dudes all like, come with me, Worf. We will detach the ship and take the battle bridge, and and we can oppose our enemies and blah 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 and stuff like that. And Worf is trying to talk him down. He's trying to de-escalate the situation. The guy has a phaser, Worf has a phaser, and Worf doesn't want to kill one of his own. And so the dude just will not listen. But Worf trying to de-escalate the situation verbally and everything is exactly what his Starfleet training has taught him and everything, which Klingons don't do. Klingons just jump into battle and everything. So the Klingon dude didn't want to listen, and Worf had to shoot him. So he falls through the glass on the overhead, like it's kind of like a balcony type thing. of like engineering and falls straight through the glass, and it's beautifully shot. So Worf does the little death ritual type thing. I think I called it a funeral or burial thing before, the death ritual. My bad. I couldn't think of what it was called. So Worf does it because he learned from his people, and so now he redid it. And so, like, when they're back on the bridge talking to that Commander Klingon, they asked him something somebody asked before in the show, and he responded the same way. So, after a Klingon dies, a non Klingon asks, "Hey, what do you want us to do with the body?" They tell you straight up the body is just an empty shell and treat it as such. They could care less about the body once it's gone. They don't even bury it and stuff. It's just like the warrior has done his thing. He has now passed. He will be respected and stories will be told of him. But the body is just meaningless and now. It's pointless now. And so the commander dude asked Worf and everything, like, why don't you serve aboard a Klingon ship and everything? You can, what is it? You can learn from us and we can learn from you and everything. And he declines and stuff. He rather just like, work aboard like the Starship and the Federation with like the humans and stuff. Cause he sees firsthand kind of like what his people are like and everything. They're brash, they're rash, they jump into things, they just always want to fight. And like they have this honor and stuff. And plus, if the Klingons learn from Worf, they will learn secrets from the Federation and everything. And and I'm glad Worf stayed on the show because they could have easily wrote him out. But thankfully, Denise Cosby wanted to leave the show, so they killed her character off, and Worf became security chief, which made no sense in the first season because he was still wearing the wrong color uniform. But thankfully, they gave him the right color and the proper rank of lieutenant in the second season. So when it comes to Worf, he has lots of great solo episodes. I could have picked any one because they're so good and everything when it comes to actual Klingon solo episodes. Other other episodes, like when he's in the holodeck or hanging out with his son, can be a little silly, a little goofy. I do love the parallel episode, the whole parallel dimensions things. That was great. And so for Black History Month, I decided to pick this episode because of the simple fact all the black parallels and metaphors that are in this episode between the Klingons and like black people. I wanted to also do a Geordie review episode, but for Black History Month, I just couldn't find a good one. Geordie is kind of like the punching bag of like the show. He can't get the girl, and like his solo episodes are either him being really mean and rude to people, him being hurt and have to rely on somebody else, him being brainwashed, or him just not getting the girl. So there was really no point in doing that. Happy Black History Month, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye.